Last night, while most of America slept, the Republican Party made a decision that would reshape its future for years to come. It wasn't a handful of senators quietly expressing concern, nor a few House members releasing carefully worded statements. This was the party's entire leadership, Senate Majority Leader, committee chairs, whips, the full command of the Republican caucus gathering behind closed doors in the United States Capitol to make a move that would define American politics for the next decade. By 4 a.m., 47 of 51 Republican senators had signed a letter declaring they would no longer support, defend, or enable the president's agenda. That letter included language never before used by a party about its sitting president, an unacceptable threat to the constitutional order. And when Warren Buffett's overnight statement leaked, quantifying the measurable dollar-denominated cost of political chaos, the quiet revolt transformed into a full-blown movement. This is the story of how it unfolded hour by hour from the initial phone call at 6 p.m. through secret gatherings and confrontations to the moment at 4 a.m. when the Republican Party officially broke with its own president. It all began with a single phone call at 5:47 p.m. Donald Trump had just signed an executive order removing the Attorney General of the United States, replacing him with an acting AG whose career was almost entirely defined by defending Trump on cable television. Officially, the order cited a loss of confidence, the standard bureaucratic phrasing for a presidential firing, but in Washington, everyone knew the truth. The AG had refused to halt a criminal investigation connected to Judge Callaway's impeachment referral, insisting that interfering would constitute obstruction of justice. Trump's response was immediate: fire him. The scene echoed the Saturday night massacre of 1973 when Nixon fired his attorney general to try to stop Watergate. But this was the 21st century version, Trump removing an attorney general to protect himself from impeachment. By 3 p.m., just 16 minutes after the order was signed, the Senate Majority Leader, called the Senate Minority Leader, that 9-minute call would set everything in motion. According to sources briefed on the conversation, the Majority Leader, careful for months to balance institutional duty with party loyalty, spoke 4 words that would change the trajectory of American conservatism. It's time tonight. Within half an hour, every committee chair and senior senator in the Republican caucus had been notified. The message was clear: emergency meeting, Capitol building, 9 p.m., off the record. No staff, no phones, no exceptions. That call was the spark, the moment the party's power structure began to dissolve and reconstitute itself. 9 minutes and 4 words altered the axis of American conservatism. Between 6 and 9 p.m., the Capitol became a hive of quiet, purposeful activity, largely invisible to reporters. Senators arrived in unmarked vehicles, entering through side doors and underground corridors, carrying nothing, no aides, no briefcases, nothing. Many called their spouses to explain they wouldn't be home that night, a signal that something historic was underway. One senator's wife later told reporters that when her husband called at 7:15, he said, "Don't wait up. What's about to happen is going to change everything." His voice shook a sound she had never heard in 23 years of marriage. Meanwhile, Trump sat in the White House residence, watching cable news and posting on Truth Social about the AG dismissal, framing it as a decisive action to clean up a corrupt Justice Department. He was satisfied with himself, believing he had executed a defining power move. He had no idea that his action had triggered a chain reaction that would soon engulf his own party. By 8:45 p.m., all senior Republican senators and committee chairs had gathered. Capitol Police were informed of an emergency conference, but details were limited. At exactly 9 p.m., doors were sealed and phones locked in a box outside. Several senators would later describe this moment as when the gravity of the night hit them. The meeting, described as the most consequential internal gathering of the Republican Party since Watergate, began with the Majority Leader delivering a 15-minute assessment of the party's state. He presented the facts with surgical precision. Trade wars had devastated voters across the heartland. The judicial impeachment referral was legally sound. The president's rhetoric had mobilized the National Guard in 3 states. Markets had shed trillions. The party's approval rating was at its lowest point since Watergate. International allies were withdrawing. And now the firing of the AG represented a clear act of obstruction of justice. His conclusion was blunt: continue defending this president and risk losing the majority, credibility, legacy, and possibly the republic, or act immediately to begin rebuilding? There were no alternatives. Then, in a move that stunned the room, he asked for a show of hands. How many believed the president was fit to serve? Fewer than 10 of the more than 50 senators raised their hands. Every person in the room saw it. The hands that stayed down belonged to career politicians who had long defended, excused, or enabled Trump. Yet, even as the majority was clear, a block of 8-10 MAGA loyalists pushed back. The strongest voice came from a senior senator in a deep red state, a longtime Trump defender, who argued that abandoning the man who built the party would cost them their base forever. The majority leader replied methodically, the base was already suffering. Farms, factories, gas prices, retirement accounts, their livelihoods were being hurt while the president fought the wrong battles. Another first-term senator worried about political fallout if Trump survived. A retiring senator with nothing left to lose silenced the room with a single line. If we don't do this and the republic fails, being finished won't be our biggest problem. Silence followed. No rebuttal was possible. By 11 p.m., leaks had begun. Reporters had spotted senators entering through side entrances, and the Washington Post reported an emergency Republican conference underway. But the meeting pressed on. 3 previously silent senators declared support for the revolt, and a drafting committee, 2 conservatives, 1 moderate, 1 libertarian, began preparing what would become one of the most important internal party documents in modern history. Meanwhile, Trump dismissed the meeting from the White House, confident that the party lacked the courage to act. He was wrong. As midnight approached, the drafting committee continued its work, while smaller clusters of senators debated quietly around the room. Then, during a brief recess, a moment arrived that would change everything. One senator stepped into the hallway, retrieved his phone from the lockbox, and checked the headlines. Warren Buffett had issued a statement at 10 p.m. responding to the AG dismissal, and although the statement had circulated through financial media, it had not yet reached the sealed room. The senator returned and read Buffett's statement aloud. Silence fell immediately. Buffett reframed the crisis with clarity and precision. When a president fires an attorney general to obstruct a constitutional process, it is not merely a political event, it is an economic event. Markets respond to the rule of law, and when that law is undermined, markets reprice everything. Then Buffett did something unprecedented. He assigned a specific cost to the chaos. The political instability, trade wars, tariffs, and market volatility over recent months had cost the American economy approximately $2.7 trillion in market value, eliminated around 340,000 jobs, and reduced GDP growth by 1.4 percentage points. This wasn't theory, it wasn't opinion, it was arithmetic. $2.7 trillion, directly hitting retirement accounts, pension funds, college savings, and the net worth of every American holding stocks, bonds, or 401ks. Buffett framed it as a fiduciary obligation. Lawmakers like him had a legal and moral duty to protect the assets entrusted to them. How could anyone justify loyalty to a leader who was actively destroying the financial security of their constituents? Then came the line that shifted the debate inside that room. Defending a leader stops being loyalty and becomes negligence. Those who continued enabling the administration's economic destruction were no longer serving the people who elected them, they were acting against them. Negligence, in legal terms, carries liability. Buffett had not called breaking with Trump disloyal, he called staying negligent. Every senator understood the implications immediately. The framing gave them not just moral permission, but a compelling financial and legal rationale to break with the president. For the first time that night, all doubt in the room fell away. By 1 a.m., the drafting committee finalized a statement of principles for the Republican caucus. Key language was read aloud. The undersigned would no longer support, defend, or enable the president's agenda. His actions, including obstructing constitutional processes, inciting political violence, and undermining economic stability, were an unacceptable threat to the constitutional order. Some senators nodded, some stared at the floor, one quietly wiped away tears. That phrase, unacceptable threat to the constitutional order, was chosen with surgical precision, mirroring impeachment language without invoking the word itself. It was a clear signal to the House, the courts, and the country these senators were prepared to vote for conviction in a Senate trial. The document also included forward-looking language, committing to work across party lines to stabilize the economy, restore trade relationships, and rebuild institutional norms damaged during this unprecedented period of presidential misconduct. It told the nation that the senators were not simply abandoning Trump, they were presenting an alternative. It told hesitant colleagues that signing the letter was not an end, it was a beginning. Debate over the wording was fierce, even within the drafting committee. Some argued for stronger, harsher language, call it criminal conduct, demand removal outright. Others advocated softer phrasing. The final version threaded the needle, strong enough to endure constitutional crisis, yet measured enough to withstand primary challenges. By 2 a.m., the holdout bloc had shrunk from 10 to 4. Buffett's statement had convinced 3 of the holdouts to switch immediately. 2 more changed after a call from a prominent Republican donor, bluntly stating, "Sign the letter or we fund your primary challenger. This is not a request." And then there was the senator who changed everything by saying nothing. The same deep red state senator who had passionately defended Trump hours earlier stepped out for 25 minutes. When he returned at 2:40 a.m., he walked silently to the table, picked up the pen, and signed the letter. Sources say he had received a call from his wife explaining that their daughter's school had received credible threats connected to his televised defense of Trump's Civil War rhetoric. That moment transformed him, and watching him sign in silence became the emotional fulcrum of the night for everyone present. By 3 a.m., 47 of 51 Republican senators had signed the letter. Only 4 holdouts remained, all from deep red states, calculating that their voters would punish defection more harshly than complicity. 47 signatures. This was not a revolt, it was an extinction event. At 3:12 a.m., Trump learned of the letter from a Loyalist senator among the final 4. He reacted with a string of expletives, demanding the names of those who had signed, threatening to primary each and every one. He called the majority leader, then other senior senators, then the RNC chair. Ring after ring, voicemail after voicemail. No one answered. For the first time in years, the threat that had kept Republicans compliant, the fear of a Trump-backed primary, was irrelevant. At 3:47 a.m., he posted on Truth Social, calling the senators the enemy and threatening them all. But no one flinched. At 4 a.m., the letter was released to the press, posted on the Senate's website, and sent through official channels to the White House. 47 Republican senators, including the majority leader and nearly every committee chair spanning 38 states, had formally declared the president's conduct an unacceptable threat to the constitutional order. Individual statements accompanied the letter. Some cited military service, others grandchildren. One former federal prosecutor wrote plainly, "The evidence is clear. The conduct is impeachable. My oath is to the Constitution, not any man." Another, an early Trump supporter who had campaigned, defended, and weathered storms alongside him, said, "I boarded this train because I believed it was headed somewhere worth going. Tonight, I'm stepping off because I can see where it's headed, and I won't ride it over a cliff." By 4:15 a.m., television networks broke the story, and within minutes, the revolt became the top global trending topic, translated into 30 languages before dawn. The Republican Party, as Trump had known it, was gone before the sun rose. Trump did not sleep. Between 4 and 7 a.m., he posted 23 times on Truth Social every 8 minutes, escalating from anger to threats, conspiracy theories, and paranoid spirals. In his narrative, the revolt was orchestrated by the deep state. Senators had been bribed by foreign governments. The majority leader was a radical left puppet, and the entire night was a coup, the largest in American history. But in reality, the night had been orchestrated quietly, meticulously, by the senators themselves, acting in secret to reclaim control. At 6:45 a.m., he called a press conference in the White House briefing room. Unlike the usual scene, he arrived alone. The podium, normally flanked by senior officials and the visual signals of presidential authority, was bare. No chief of staff, no press secretary, no congressional allies. Just Trump, the podium, and a room full of reporters witnessing a rare sight, the most powerful office in the world, looking diminished. He spoke for 12 minutes, his voice raw from hours of shouting at staff and screaming into phones. His hands trembled visibly as he gripped the podium. He called the senators traitors, cowards, backstabbers, and the most disloyal people in history, perhaps in the world. He insisted the revolt was illegal, that the letter constituted treason, and that the senators would face consequences beyond imagining. When a reporter asked about the 47 Republican senators who had signed, Trump's answer revealed his mindset. I made every single one of them. Without me, they'd be nothing. They'd be nobody selling insurance in strip malls, and this is how they repay me in the middle of the night. Like thieves. Like thieves. That single phrase captures how Trump processed the moment. He did not see senators exercising constitutional duty. He saw them stealing from him. In his world, the party belonged to him personally, and loyalty was absolute. Anyone who placed the Constitution above Trump had committed theft. Markets opened at 9:30 a.m., and the verdict was immediate. The Dow surged 400 points in the first hour. The S&P 500 jumped nearly 2%. Bond yields stabilized, and Wall Street's fear index dropped sharply. The markets, after months of volatility, were responding to political stability. Buffett's calculation of $2.7 trillion in lost wealth began to reverse. International investors returned to American assets, signaling renewed confidence in the system, messy and slow though it may be. This market response was the cruelest verdict of all for Trump. He had built his brand around being good for business, for the economy, and for retirement accounts. Yet the very next morning, the global financial system and every stock ticker silently delivered the same message: America is worth more without you. The world reacted swiftly as well. The European Union issued a statement praising institutional resilience in the United States and signaling readiness to re-engage on trade and security. Canada's Prime Minister offered to resume constructive negotiations, reversing months of tension following punitive tariffs. Japan and South Korea indicated a willingness to revisit stalled trade agreements, and Australia's foreign minister welcomed the news from Washington, emphasizing that a strong, stable America was crucial for global stability. Allies who had doubted the reliability of U.S. institutions for months suddenly exhaled, reassured by the 47 signatures of the Republican senators. By mid-morning, the 4 holdout senators were under pressure from constituents, donors, and staff. 2 issued statements indicating they respected the caucus's decision and would engage constructively, essentially capitulating without acknowledgement. One holdout's communications director publicly resigned, stating, "I can't defend the indefensible. My boss should have signed that letter." Meanwhile, Fox News descended into visible chaos. Morning opinion hosts defended Trump furiously, branding the revolt the greatest betrayal in American political history. But the network's news division treated the letter as a legitimate constitutional development, interviewing legal scholars and former Republican officials who validated the reasoning of the signatories. The internal tension between commentary and news reporting became a story of its own. And then the legal and political arithmetic sank in. Every analyst in Washington understood what the letter implied. The phrase unacceptable threat to the constitutional order carried the weight of implicit impeachment. 47 Republican senators had now signaled that the president's conduct was impeachable, combined with every Democratic senator that exceeded the 67 votes required to convict in a Senate trial. The House Judiciary Committee, already reviewing Judge Callaway's impeachment referral, immediately subpoenaed the letter as evidence of bipartisan consensus that the president's conduct warranted removal. A formal vote in the House could arrive within 72 hours. A Senate trial could begin within weeks. The votes for conviction were already effectively cast, signed, sealed, and delivered at 4 a.m. by members of the president's own party. By now, the narrative of the night was clear. It began at 6:03 p.m. with 4 simple words: "It's time tonight." By 9 p.m., more than 50 Republican senators were locked in a sealed room, phones secured, doors closed, careers on the line. The majority leader asked the critical question, who believed the president was fit to serve? Fewer than 10 hands went up. Buffett's statement, framing continued support as negligence and quantifying the economic cost at $2.7 trillion, shifted the entire debate. Senators not only had moral justification, but financial and legal obligation to break. By 3 a.m., 47 senators had signed, formally declaring the president's conduct an unacceptable threat to the constitutional order. Trump found out at 3:12 a.m., tried to call leadership, received no answers, threatened primaries, and finally by dawn, the weapon of fear he had used for 8 years was gone. By dawn, the letter was public. 47 Republican senators had officially broken with Donald Trump, declaring his conduct an unacceptable threat to the constitutional order. Markets were surging, confidence was returning, and America's allies were cautiously relieved. Trump, who had built his entire political empire on fear and loyalty, watched as his power evaporated in real time. 47 senators had signed a document in the dead of night saying they were no longer afraid and there was nothing he could do to reverse it. Will the House vote on impeachment within 72 hours? If they do, will those 47 Republican senators follow through and vote to convict a sitting president from their own party? Could Trump survive as president after his party formally condemned him, or is resignation the only path that preserves any legacy at all? And as the dust settles, what does a post-Trump Republican Party even look like? Who rises from the wreckage to lead a party that destroyed its own house in order to save the broader neighborhood? It all began with 4 simple words at 6:03 p.m. It's time tonight. By 4 a.m., the revolt had concluded, careers and legacies had shifted irrevocably, and the United States witnessed a political realignment unprecedented in modern history. The phone calls, secret meetings, debates, Buffett's financial reckoning, the final signatures, and the emotional turning points in that room, the retiring senator, the deep red state defender, the holdouts finally relenting, all combined into a sequence of events that could only have been described as methodical, deliberate, and historically consequential. For 8 years, Trump's presence had reshaped the Republican Party through fear, loyalty, and spectacle. In one night, the party reasserted its institutional power, signaling not only to Trump but to the country and the world that there is a constitutional order above individual ambition, a line that cannot be crossed without consequences. The aftermath is already visible. The markets responded, the Dow climbed, the S&P surged, and bond yields stabilized. Investors re-entered positions they had abandoned months earlier. International leaders signaled renewed trust and cooperation. Domestically, the 4 remaining holdouts faced immediate pressure from constituents, donors, and staff, with resignations and public statements reinforcing the magnitude of the shift. Media coverage was chaotic, highlighting both the loyalty-driven defense of Trump and the sober constitutional reasoning behind the revolt. And while Trump raged online, the country moved forward. The letter's language, unacceptable threat to the constitutional order, has already made impeachment all but inevitable, creating a pathway for the House and Senate to act quickly. It is a moment that combines legal gravity, political calculation, and historical significance in ways rarely seen. This story, starting with a single phone call and 4 decisive words, illustrates the complex intersection of loyalty, governance, and accountability. 47 senators acted in unison to prioritize the Constitution and the Republic over personal allegiance, even in the face of threats, personal risk, and political fallout. The night ended not in chaos, but with clarity. Institutions function when individuals uphold them, even against a leader who has spent years undermining them. For the markets, allies, and the American public, the signal was unmistakable. America is more stable and secure when the rule of law is respected and no individual is above it. As the sun rose over Washington, the Republican Party that emerged was not the party of one man, but the party of a collective decision to act, safeguard the Republic, and protect the constitutional order, regardless of personal cost.